can find you, Tracey?
Okay, sure. So I am Tracey B. I am a former family law attorney. Now I am a pro se advocate, pro se coach, and pro se strategist. I work with people who are represented, but my main focus is people who are going through the family court system and they're representing themselves. They are brave enough to represent themselves. So I am coaching them through that whole process. I'm teaching them some of the tricks and tips that attorneys use. I'm teaching them how the court process works, and I'm also showing them how to navigate it without spending their kids' college funds and their retirement. Yeah, so that's what I do. I've been doing that for the last couple of years. I've been in family law for about 20 years now. And yeah, I am a blogger, a writer, a mom, an entrepreneur. And where you can find me, my company is called The Divorce Solutionist, because I provide solutions to every problem that you have in your divorce and or custody matter. So on Instagram, I'm at The Divorce Solutionist. On Facebook, I'm at The Divorce Solutionist. And on TikTok, I am the Family Court Strategist on TikTok. So there, and I'm on YouTube. I'm the Divorce Solutionist on YouTube as well. So there you have it.
Thank you. That is such a wonderful introduction. I'm going to tell you something, Tracey. I have so many questions for you because I want to make sure that, one, I don't get divorced, but let's say something happens and my wife at that time loses her mind because I'm such an amazing man, right? And decides to leave me. Then I want to be protected as well. So take us through the beginning. How did you get involved in divorce, and why family court specifically when there's so many other different types of law to be practicing in?
I am an altruist by nature. I've always served people. My first profession was in mental health, so I've always served the population that needed help. And so I gravitated toward family law, actually by default. It wasn't planned that way, but I found my way in it and wind up staying because I loved it so much. I love helping people, trying to salvage their families as much as possible. And that's, it's not an easy thing because it's constant emergencies and putting fires out and crises and all that stuff. But it's so rewarding when I hear someone come back to me to tell me that they were able to get, custody of their kids because of something that I helped them with. So that's so much more fulfilling. And yeah, it's something, like I said, I fell into, but once I found myself in it, I just decided to stay, and here I am.
So I know for a lot of men out there, when they hear family court, they're like, right? It can be scary to a lot of men. What are some of the misconceptions maybe that we have of the family court system that you want to maybe debunk today?
Oh, I have a few of them. A lot of people think, number one, that all judges are pro moms and none of them are pro dads. That is not the truth at all. That is not the truth. There are some states where the law is automatically 50-50. So it doesn't matter whether you're, a likable dad or a likable mom. That's the starting point. So in those states, particularly, dads get, equal treatment. In Florida, actually, just recently, Florida passed a law where dads are automatically presumed to be the dad in custody matters, where they don't have to establish paternity and all of that stuff. They're starting at an equal playing field to begin with, which is great. Another myth is that when you go to court, the judge wants to hear, wants to hear all the bad things that the other party did. They want to hear how they broke up, how they were before the kids came into play. The courts don't want to hear any of that. The courts really do not want to hear bickering parents. They just don't. They'd rather you settle in a mediation and come to them with a parenting plan that's ready to go, or a divorce agreement that's ready to go. They don't want to hear bickering. They really don't want to do that. The other thing is that most people think that family court is about fairness. It's about the best interest of the child, and it's not. Family court is really about what's efficient for family court, period. Family court is not necessarily the place that you want to air out your dirty family laundry, because it can be judges they get to the point that a lot of them have gotten to the point where they have what's called compassion fatigue. So they don't empathize with the fact that your kids are crying about not going to the other parent's home, or that, they don't care about that. They hear this stuff all day. So your story is no different than anybody else's. They're not going to look at you and see your little weepy eyes and say, you know what, I feel so sorry for you. Let me just grant you whatever you're at. It doesn't work like that. Family court is really destructive. It really actually creates more conflict than it helps to solve. And I think that's the biggest myth that's out there. There's a lot of people, most people don't know that until they've been in the family court system for at least one round of custody or divorce. Then they realize, they start to see the truth, that the judge doesn't care about evidence. The judge doesn't care about how bad they were treated. The judge doesn't care about the fact that they were emotionally abused. The judge doesn't care about the fact that they were physically abused. The judge doesn't care anything about that. The judge cares about getting you out of their courtroom, period. They don't want you there. That's what they want. They want you to resolve things on your own. So those are some of the major myths.
I know for me, I took law up to paralegal in my education, and I saw, because of the law firm that I was working at when I was getting my experience and things like that, it was brief. It was about a year. I remember seeing, and all the hours you had to put in, I remember seeing different courtrooms. So I saw the family court system a little bit, and I saw the criminal and the real estate and things like that, because it was part of our experience. And I remember seeing family court, and I was like, this is not for me. Because to your point, I went into there thinking, okay, what's fair to everyone involved? I came out and I was like, wow. They're like, okay, this is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to do it. And if you don't, you're in contempt.
That's it. That's
right?
Exactly right.
And when I used to hear people who don't have that experience, who I guess they see what they see on TV and things like that, because everyone thinks it's paramason, right? Where I'm like, aha, I have the smoking gun. And it's going to turn everything.
True. Yep.
Right. But it's more so, okay, I spoke to a lawyer and I was working with a lawyer, and the judge said, okay, if you want your children go to this school, you're planning to move out of state. So if the child was with you 100% of the time, are you going to drive across state lines to drop that kid to school? Or you're going to remove and just uproot that child from everything? And the parent was like, oh, I didn't think of that. That's what you have to think of when you go to family court. So Tracey, when you're helping people to prepare themselves, are they naive enough thinking that, well, I'm a good guy, I should get the children? Like, how do you help them prepare and maybe help them get over some of the naivety that they may be experiencing before they actually get into the courtroom?
That's an excellent question. The people who are first-time family court litigants, I often suggest to them that they go watch YouTube videos, that they go read blogs, that they join Facebook groups, that they join Reddit groups, so they can hear the reality. Because a lot of times people are so disillusioned about the process. I mean, it's amazing how many people are so disillusioned by the process because they've never been through it. And then they're blindsided because they went in there with this naive thinking. So a lot of times, if they're coming to me, especially for coaching, I often tell them, you have to start with finding out the truth. And that truth is going to be exposed to you by, like I just said, joining groups, support groups, Reddit groups, Facebook groups, watching videos. I mean, wherever you can find out the truth, that's what you need to do. Because the better prepared you are by not having all these, ideal images of what it's going to be like, the better you are positioning yourself to get the outcome that you want. And so, yes, I always start them with that. And then I also always tell them to visit their court's website. I always tell people, go onto your court's website. There's a wealth of information on there. You should not go into court not knowing where you stand, what to call the judge, what custody means. You should not. There's no way you should go in there without knowing that. And believe it or not, there's some people who are represented by attorneys who don't have a clue because their attorneys don't even explain the process to them. So it's your job. When you're a first-time litigant, it's your job to do your own due diligence. No, don't rely on anybody else feeding that stuff to you. do as much research as you can before you step foot in there. And that way you won't be blindsided, because a lot of times when people are blindsided, they make themselves vulnerable. And that's where the attack comes in. And that's where those losses pile up because of that. So when you're working with me, I don't tolerate that. I'm competitive. You are not going to put yourself in a position to be vulnerable, to be attacked, to be decimated. Not when you're working with me. So yeah, that's that. I always give them those pieces of advice.
And I think at least in America, it's different from state to state. Like some states have no fault divorce, right? And some states, I believe, they don't have that. Where I am in Canada, it's more so, okay, my wife and I, we go to the court system and say, hey, this is not working out. We have a year of separation to make sure this is something we want to do. And then we go from there. But to your point, there's a lot of people that they would actually go into the court system, or at least prepare to be divorced, with their hands empty and their pockets even emptier. They have no idea what they're walking into. And when they walk into that situation and they get destroyed, they come out and they say, you know what? It's not my fault. It's Tracey's fault.
Exactly.
Right? Have you experienced
exactly
that?
What they did. Absolutely. I am every single day in my messaging, I'm constantly reminding people of that. You have to do, whether you have an attorney or you're self-represented, it is your responsibility to check your mindset, to make sure you're prepared, to make sure you do your own due diligence, to not give anybody 100% control over your case. It's your responsibility to do exactly that. Because what happens is you'll come out and you'll blame everybody else. You'll blame your ex or your soon-to-be ex. You'll blame the lawyers. You'll blame the judges. You'll blame everybody else for the outcomes except you. No one wants to take responsibility or accountability for the role they play. And believe it or not, I'm making enemies doing that. There's a lot of people like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I've been doing this long enough. And I can assure you that if you constantly, some people, their representation is Facebook. Their lawyers are Facebook groups where they're getting legal advice from Facebook groups. And then they come back and talk about how tragic the outcome was. Well, yeah, you didn't do your own homework. You relied on advice from a bunch of non-lawyers who are just, you know how they have the jailhouse lawyers? They have Facebook lawyers now who think they get degrees because they've been in groups, and they got those honorary law degrees, and they're out there giving legal advice, and people are actually taking it and applying it. And then they come back and say, hey, it's everybody's fault but mine. Well, that's what you get.
No one has more clients than a social media lawyer.
Absolutely. That's it. There you go. I might have to steal that one.
And we make light and I laugh because you can go on social media and you can say, oh, my back is hurting. And there's a doctor on social media that's going to prescribe you something. Oh, don't worry. You know what your medical doctor spent all those years doing. They don't know what they're talking about. Just pop these pills, lay down, and you'll be fine. And the one thing I love when it comes to like relationships, right, is they'll go to someone who has the worst track record in relationships, right? And then they'll be like, oh, really? That happened to you? Okay, what did you do? And the person's like, oh, I went there and the judge, they're racist, they're sexist, they don't like me and things like that. And then when I listen to this stuff, I'm like, the judge doesn't care who you are. Right. After this case is done, they won't even know who you are. They'll remember you. But sometimes we feel that we're so important that when we go in there, it's me versus the stenographer, the court officer, the judge, all the lawyers, including my own. It's the world against us. And one thing I want to ask you is, if I was going through a divorce and I have people chirping in the background, right, saying that men get the raw end of the stick, men get the short end of the stick, men get bullied in courts, no one's listening to us in the court. What are some of the ways that I can still prepare myself to, one, not fall into the trap of believing everything that people are telling me because their experience may not be mine, and two, to make sure that I get the outcome that I'm looking for?
One thing that I often mention to, I don't prefer men over women. I work with both equally. But one thing I do realize is that my approach to working with men is very different than my approach to when I'm working with women. Men always want to start from the top down. They want to start with the judge's supervisor and the legislature or that's what they want to do, right? If something doesn't work out, they want to go right to the top. And I'm always trying to talk them down. That's not where you start. Don't automatically assume that the judge is not going to be on your side or it's going to be biased. Please don't assume that. Number one. Number two, it is so incredibly invaluable to research your judge. Get to know who your judge is, get to know who the players are in your courtroom, get to know who they are. The best way to influence someone or to persuade someone with your story or your argument is to know what appeals to them, right? You're not going to make the same argument to everybody because everybody doesn't care. We interpret information differently. We learn differently. So the same thing in the courtroom. You want to know the judge. If you're going before the judge, know who your judge is. Know what matters to your judge. Know what preferences your judge has. That helps incredibly. It helps to know those things. And then the third thing is, and you'd be amazed by how many people have no clue what the difference is between shared custody and 50-50 custody. Or sole custody and joint custody. So they go into court expecting, sole custody in a state that doesn't even award sole custody. And so when they don't get it, they think it's the judge's fault. No, well, had you done your research, you would know that in your specific state, joint custody is the presuming starting point. It's not because it's you and your dad and you're asking for sole. It's because that's not normally given in your state. So, and you'd be surprised how many people don't even do that. They don't even, man and woman, dad and mom, they don't even do that. So I think those three things are incredibly important. Don't start at the top. Don't be ready to go and seek out the judge's supervisor or the politicians or the legislatures in your jurisdiction because you're assuming that this judge is going to be biased. Please don't do that. Number two, like I said, research the judge. Judges their information is out there. Their prior decisions and rulings on cases like yours is out there. Sometimes it's not free and accessible, but you can pay a fee and get that information about your judge. And number three, do your research. Find out exactly what's in your favor before you walk in there requesting the sun, the moon, and the stars. You in your statement, and you may not be able to get the sun. You may be able to get the moon and the stars. So know that. So yeah, those three things are incredibly important. And dads, I do think dads get an unfair shake. I'm not gonna lie to you about that. There's some places where some dads, I have clients now who are fighting excellent dads, very hands-on from day one, from the time the baby was brought home. But because they weren't married, in some states they're presumed to be they're not considered what's called a primary caregiver because they were not in the home. And it's unfair because I have a client right now who literally went to the hospital, brought the girl home with the baby, and has been at the house every single day. They didn't live together, but he was there every single day. And he's still fighting a 2-year battle for 50-50 in New York. And it's unfair. It's really unfair. But that's exactly the law that Florida just enacted. They stopped that from that being the case in Florida. So hopefully there'll be some other states that'll follow suit. But for right now, yeah, I do think there are dads who get an unfair shake.
For those who are following along on Facebook, YouTube, and my social media, please subscribe, share, and like for more incredible interviews like the one we have with my new best friend, Tracey. And we will be back for more. So stay tuned, everyone.